Since the election is around the corner, today let's talk about different tax policies that were implemented from 4 different prime ministers and 3 different parties during our last few years. Starting off with the most famous Najib Razak, which is our prime minister in 2018 before the change of government. During that time, before the election in 2018, which is the pre-election budget in end 2017, the same mechanism, the same proposal was introduced, whereby they say, okay, individual tax, let's reduce by 2%, which is on the income tax band of 20,000 to 70,000. And during that time, our RPGT for individual, if you dispose after 5th year, the RPGT is 0%. And the legacy during that time by him is our GST, which was implemented back to 2015. And it is a very fantastic good system, but the administration part caused a lot of problem, haywire, because of the refund, very late refund, and causes a lot of cash flow issues to our small medium enterprises. So during that time, there's a bit of a hoo-ha saying that the GST is not a good system, and hence 509 there's a change of government. Pakatan Harapan took over. During that time, the Prime Minister is our Tun Dr. Mahathir, and the first thing that they did in 2018 is abolish our GST, which causes estimated revenue loss to the government of 21 billion and transition GST back to our sales and services tax. Now in 2019 budget, there are a few very interesting policies that were introduced. Now we know that the government needs tax revenue from the people or from the businesses. So what they did was, number one, they introduced special voluntary disclosure program. To say that, okay, come and disclose yourself, come and declare yourself, you just have to pay a 10% penalty or 15% penalty, then we won't conduct any audit. So during that time, SVDP was introduced. Our corporate tax was reduced by 1% to 17% for our first 500,000, and they cut the losses. Okay, so those are the policies that were introduced. And the most important, I think, is the RPGT for 5th year and above. RPGT become 5%. So I think the previous administration loved RPGT to be 0%, while the new government on Pakatan Harapan likes RPGT to be at 5%. It's not a right and wrong policy at the end of the day. Perhaps the RPGT is for the rich, maybe. So they want to increase it to 5%. And for company, non-citizen or non-PR, the RPGT has increased to 10%. Now on top of that, how to increase their revenue, since there's a revenue loss in GST. So they introduced gaming levy, where the casino license increased by 30 million, we have casino duties increased by 10%, we have gaming machine duties increased by 10%, and the sugar sweetened beverage now impose excise duty. So those are the policies that were introduced back in budget 2019. There are good policies, of course, which I love a lot. Employing senior citizens and employing ex-convict or ex-drug dependent, you can get a double tax deduction. Budget 2020, which is the last budget before the change of government again, there is an introduction of tax identification number. So tax identification number TIN, which was mentioned in our budget 2022, was first introduced back in budget 2020 by the previous government, Pakatan Harapan. And from the 500,000 SME, first chargeable income 500,000 at 17%, they increased it to 600,000. And they changed the SME definition. Small medium enterprises, in order to enjoy 17%, a preferential rate, your turnover cannot be 50 million. And they introduced digital service tax. That is on budget 2020. Now there comes the MCO, and there comes Mahathir's resignation. After Mahathir's resignation on 24 February 2020, Mahathir announced a stimulus package. Amid the COVID is here, they introduced one policy which I love a lot until now, whereby renovation can claim a special tax deduction up to 300,000. Now thereafter, Mahathir, we have a change of hands to our Perikatan Nasional, which is under Muhyiddin. So Muhyiddin took over as our new Prime Minister, which is the 3rd Prime Minister in our story. During that time, a lot of incentives were introduced, a lot of subsidies were introduced. Our wage subsidy program, 600 to 1,200 per employee, free money because of the MCO. We have GKP introduced, 3,000 for each self-employed person. We have hiring incentive for 6 months for those that employ new employees. And most important is, I think, is the tax rebate for 20,000 for new companies incorporated during that time. 3 years tax rebate for new companies incorporated. 3 years. That is equivalent to 100 over 1,000 per year. You do not need to pay tax. So that is the stimulus package that was introduced. But Muhyiddin took over the power during COVID period, during MCO. And not much of tax policies or a way to recover tax revenue can be done. No new tax policies were introduced during that time. It's the same across the whole world. Everyone is giving out subsidies, giving out grants in order to help the economy during that time because a lot of industries stuck. Retails were stuck. There's not much of tax policies that can be introduced during that time. It's only candies after candies. Oh, I forgot one of the most interesting candy is the sales tax exemption for local assembled cars, 100% sales tax exemption and 50% on imported cars, but that is no longer applicable. The only thing I can see that they have tightened the tax rules is in Budget 2021, which is the one and only budget announcement done by Muhyiddin time. The individual tax rate reduced by 1% and they have a new transfer pricing rules introduced. 20,000 plus 5% surcharge. So that was introduced, but during that time the transfer pricing focuses on multinational companies, not so much on all the companies, all the SMEs, so the impact is not that huge. Until 20 August 2021, Ismail Sabri, our new Prime Minister, number 4th Prime Minister in our story, took over, and a month after he took over, he implemented 12 Malaysian Plan. Now, 12 Malaysian Plan, there's one tax policy that is very important, which is the carbon pricing. For under carbon pricing, there's one item called carbon tax. So that is very impactful. It is a must Malaysia implement carbon tax or carbon pricing so that they can attract more FDIs. Under the new administration, they try to push more green activities, such as our electric vehicle. You can claim relief. You buy the charging facilities, you can claim relief. And apart from that, there's another one which is also more interesting is the Cukai Makmur were introduced during the budget 2022, talking about companies who earn 100 million chargeable income have to pay 33% instead of 24% for the excess of 100 million. Foreign income now have to pay tax unless you qualify for those exemptions. But they changed the law and say foreign income bring back to Malaysia, you have to pay tax, and they have revert the RPGT back to 0%. It seems that under the new Prime Ministers, which is strongly influenced by Barisan Nasional wants RPGT to be 0%. I think that is the story that we can see. Najib RPGT is 0%, and when it comes to the new Prime Minister Ismail Sabri took over the administration, the first thing they do is during the budget revert RPGT back to 0%. The Cukai Makmur is a big topic. Some of the companies or some of the MNC says it is not fair, or some of the companies in Malaysia say it's not fair. They did well, but they still have to pay extra taxes, and extra taxes is imposed one-off. So they say this is not fair to the businesses, and the policies are unstable in some cases. So that is the feedback that we heard from the news and from the articles, saying that the Cukai Makmur is a policy that shouldn't be implemented during that time, because it creates a question mark to businesses. If I'm doing well in Malaysia, will you impose another additional tax to us? And that may influence the decision whether they want to invest. That may influence FDI whether they want to set up the company in Malaysia or not. Those are the tax policies that were introduced during this 4 different Prime Ministers' administration. There's no right and wrong. Every government has their own direction. But basically, looking at Barisan Nasional's back in 2018, it seems that the RPGT will definitely be 0%, and GST is a definite. It's a definite. And we have seen contracts given under GST for the past 2 years, and we know that the GST will be implemented sooner or later, regardless which government took over. I think it's a very important policy that Malaysia should adopt. I understand people may not like GST, but GST is a good policy overall for the country. At the end of the day, is the administration, whether the funds are well being utilized. So that is the next question, which we will never have an answer. Okay, so that's all for today. Thank you very much. We have a lot of tax policies being introduced during these 4 years. Whatever I share here is just the peak of the iceberg. There are more policies, such as policies to push for tourism, for manufacturing, for food production. There are a lot of policies introduced during this time. Comment if you think that I have missed some of the policies which you think is very important, so we can discuss and we can share together. Sorry, I got it. Hello.